Hey, greetings. Thanks for being here on another episode of The Business of Agriculture. Got a great show for you today because I got a great guest. This woman right here is named Christie Apple, sometimes digitally known as Crop Scout Christie. If you keep up with my stuff online, you very well might see her stuff online. She is an agronomy person. She has her own business. She has also a gainful employment. She's got a hell of a history, and she's going to talk about a vast array of specialty crops that are grown in Michigan, and we're going to talk about what that whole thing looks like, including hemp, which is a new and emerging product line. Christie Apple, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for the invitation, Damian. Always a pleasure.
All right, so here's the deal. We're coming to you from the Midwest studios of Executive Entertainment, Boy on a Bike Publishing, and De La Rosa Farms, but this is all brought to you by my good friend Nick Horeb, who has the company Harvest Profit. If you've been listening to my show, you know about Harvest Profit. It's a software solution that will help your agricultural enterprise be more profitable. After all, this is a business, and that's why you listen to the Business of Agriculture podcast. You've got inputs, you've got supplies, you've got acres, you've got landlords. You have so much stuff to manage. Are you doing that like with index cards in an old recipe drawer? No, you should do it like a professional. Go on harvestprofit.com and see what their product can do to help your business run like the business it is. All right. Damian Mason, Christie Apple, we know each other. We're buddies. She's a past client of mine. Hired me to do a thing back when she was an ag retailer up in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. So we've been keeping up ever since. And she's making a visit here to De La Rosa Farms, going to give me some stellar advice. And I said, let's go in here and talk about you, but also more importantly, about specialty crops and about the emergence of hemp and what's going to happen with that. So some background. You were an ag retailer. Start somewhere in there.
So about 11 years ago, my husband and his business partner, Chris, and myself launched an ag retail to service a small area in central Michigan, in the Gratiot County area. And really, that's where it all began. Both Jason and Chris really wanted to focus on soil health and finding solutions that were geared for improving soil quality while still keeping the farmer profitable. And so they were really doing soil health before it was cool. They were one of the old schoolers in the business, if you will. Today, that's a very popular term. That's a buzz phrase. And actually, I don't even like to use that term anymore because it means too many things.
Wait. Which term? Old schooler? Which term?
Are you taking offense to old school?
No, I just want to know which one's the buzz phrase that you don't like anymore.
Soil health. I really don't like to use that terminology anymore.
Okay, so everybody talks about soil health, but it's interesting. I know that there's people that talk to. I saw an advertisement for some sort of tillage machine that looked like straight out of the 1970s. They were beating the shit out of it, and it talked about can you improve your soil health? And I'm like, not by doing that. That's what I remember thinking. But anyway.
That's right. So soil health kind of falls under a lot of different categories. There's many different things that affect soil health. And so I really like to talk about it in terms of, what's culturally fitting for your farm and what's best for your individual soils there. So it takes a little more individual approach. And that's how we started our business, A&E Ag, all those years ago. That's how I got my start in agronomy.
Okay, so you were a sales-oriented person more than an agronomically-oriented person. You hook up with your dude, and you have a small, independent, but it's sort of a bit of a niche. not just your basic big broadacre row crop stuff. You were in a little bit of niche-y stuff with your ag retail unit, even back then, right?
Absolutely. So we hung our hat on focusing on ways to make materials more efficient, ways to grow better roots, and ways to help improve soil quality over time. So all of our solutions that we were offering looked very much like that, and that was really very unique at that time. So if you think back in terms of what did 2008, 2009, 2010 look like in agriculture, it was the lowest of the low in the housing market. And when housing is terrible, ag is strong, and that has been a traditional, ebb and flow. And so we entered into some of the best times in ag ever recorded, which gave us a really interesting perspective. People were listening to us and the message that we had because the financial barriers to enter into a soil health compliant program was the biggest obstacle previous to that. Suddenly guys were like, well, let me think about this, and realizing that this isn't about spending more money, it's about spending money in places that made the most sense. So that was kind of where we started.
Yeah, so incidentally, we call that being counter-cyclical. Agriculture is typically counter-cyclical to the mainstream economy. So if everybody's talking about how amazing things are for Main Street America, that usually means it's really bad for agricultural America, but it just tends to be that way. So what she's talking about then is they found a sort of carving out a niche, and you're big on soil health, and not just your basic, let's go out here and see how many gallons of atrazine we can dump on the ground, and then you're a self-taught agronomist. You don't have your Michigan State. I was an agronomy 303 person. You're a self-taught and self-studied, right?
Absolutely. So my entrance into the agronomy field kind of started out when I was a child. I was a science nerd. My parents really fostered my interest in studies in geology and soil and biology. In fact, I actually envisioned my dream was to be a pharmacist until I realized the amount of calculus that was required for that. And I was like, oh, that is definitely not for me. And so before I spent too many of the dollars appropriated for education, heading down a path that wasn't really right for me, I found a different place for myself, and that was studying business. I really enjoyed that. What I didn't know that from a very young age, I actually was a natural born seller. As you can tell, I've been very shy all my life, right?
Right.
No. My parents would still to this day, I'm 40 years old. My parents still tease me about being able to sell ice to, I don't know. But anyway, it's just part of that thing. And so as I was developing my salesmanship chops and my ability to connect and relate with people, I really had an interesting journey when I entered into the ag field. It was a way to rekindle my interest in sciences and to marry that with my business acumen that I had gained through the course of my professional career at that point. So was I self-taught? Sort of. I did a ton of private study, professional study by myself. This was kind of pre-Google world. This was back when computers made a bunch of weird sounds when you plugged them in and that kind of thing. And so I really worked hard. I showed up every single day to field days. I got cozy and comfortable reaching out to my extension folks, asking the right questions, and learning about the actual practical application. In fact, what I learned was most classically trained agronomists didn't even know half of what I knew because all of my education came from the field.
Yeah, so there's an interesting thing there. You can't be a degree snob, and you do have to say, okay, there's obviously credibility based on this thing. You go to, whatever, Michigan State or Kansas State or whatever, and you've got this thing. But also there tends to be that thing about bias. Well, by God, I can just tell you this, that Professor so-and-so told us this, and it was in 1991 when I was in agronomy 303, and I can just tell you that. And the thing is, sometimes they don't vary from that very much. The good thing is coming in from an outside perspective is you had to absorb a lot of stuff, and then you weren't preconditioned to say, absolutely not, here's the way it should always be.
Absolutely. And actually that caused me to ask a lot of questions. I've always been a very inquisitive person. And so that's really asking good questions is what helped to, propel me on my journey and then to be able to immediately apply that. So I like to think that I'm like a vocationally trained agronomist, and I've been mentored by some really incredible agronomists that I've looked up to for years, researchers, and really, really interested to continue on that journey. One of the things that bias that you're referring to actually helped to open up the doors and get me hungry for things. What I realized was the wheel's kind of been invented with corn and soybeans. Yeah. And not to say that there isn't still things to learn. In fact, what we're learning is the research that was done in the 20s and 30s and 40s on NP and K fertilizers were inherently flawed and has caused us to employ practices for multiple generations now that are inherently flawed and antagonistic to our soil quality and our microbial health.
You mean like overutilization? I mean, I know that I've sat through seminars that talk about actual usable, the ability for the plant to actually get it. The stuff might be there because we've kept throwing it on the soil, but there's actually what do they talk about, the ability for the plant to uptake it. Is that kind of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the fundamental industry shaping research that developed how we, our nitrogen practices on corn has now been found to be inherently flawed because we were kind of missing the fact that the soil contains a ton of nutrients and we were disregarding that and the microbial engagement that it takes to get that. So being a question asker, being a person that doesn't mind challenging the norm and not having those biases of coming through a crop and soil science program, these are questions that don't feel awkward for me to ask. And I'm not afraid to challenge a client that I'm engaging with to think outside of the NP and K box, for example.
All right. So one thing that we obviously we're not bashing on anything. It's just that we've got, like you said, we've kind of got the corn and soybean thing. We're good at it. We've got it really figured out, and wheat and your basic stuff. But starting when you were an ag retailer, you're in Michigan, which if the persons that are listening to this, let's say I got somebody that's an equipment dealer in, Kentucky or, a cotton person in Texas. Michigan is an amazing state, not because of their governor. That's actually a detriment. But agriculturally, it is an amazing state. They do have your basic row crop stuff, and they have dairies, and they have some limited swine production. Certainly, that's no Iowa. But what they have is grapes and cherries and apples and these things that because of the thermoclimates, then microclimates and all that kind of thing that come off the Great Lakes. So you were doing that even starting out. You were the science person with a sales background that all of a sudden now you got to learn about cherry production because you're helping out your husband and co-owner and an ag retailer, right?
Yeah, actually, my husband and his business partner, they grew up in the corn and soybean world. Row crop made sense to them. They had that background and they were really great at it. And they both mentored me a tremendous amount and challenging me to get better and better and better. But what I realized was I kind of liked the thrill of the new challenge. I was hungry to learn something new. I was interested in, okay, if this is what we do in corn and soybeans, or this is what we know about tillage in this, what about a permanent crop where I'm not tilling the ground every year? How does that affect the system? And so I just dove head in. And again, I just went on that journey to find the smartest people that I could find in those realms to introduce myself and to listen and to read their papers and to engage at a scholarly level and just start to understand the system, which required also understanding some of the marketing and some of the other aspects. This isn't just plant production, but there's a marketing aspect that causes us to produce different cultivars and that kind of thing.
But you had to go out and find customers that said, we're already buying our stuff. I mean, this was not just because you thought it'd be cool to learn about cherries. It was because you also were trying to sell a product.
Yeah, actually, we did have some great tools in the toolbox to be able to sell on those farms. But this is also what kind of launched my private consulting business, Crop Scout Christie Consulting. And so this has been a really fun journey for me to be able to personally engage. Yes, I do have tools in the toolbox that I can sell, but what I've been able to do in some situations for my clients, especially my remote clients, I have several clients here in Indiana, for example, in industrial hemp. I'm not selling them anything, or I may be selling them one or two things. What I'm doing is giving them the education, helping them to understand this cropping system, and then connecting them with other people that can supply them with the things that they need. Okay,
so you've moved on. You've got a normal job, so you do still sell a product, and then you've got your other thing where you're selling knowledge and advisory. So which one you want to talk about first? The still selling a product, as in cans and bottles and jars and bags? You want to talk about the advisory?
We can talk about the advisory. I do enjoy that part of my life, the retail side of my life, or the wholesale division. Actually, I'll just talk briefly about that, and we can get into the Crop Scout Christie world. But I work with TMAC Agro USA. They actually purchased my husband's ag retail location in 2017, and it was a great transition point for me personally. I actually serve that company in a couple of different roles, and I lead and train and mentor sales professionals that are trying to develop their acumen on their agronomy journey as well. And because I happen to be good at sales, that's something that not a lot of folks that know NP and K don't always have that. So I can help and support and mentor them in all different geographies all around the company.
Yeah, there's the old thing about if you can sell, you can sell. And people will get flipped out. I know that some people are more technical, like, well, I'm just not comfortable. I had one of my clients wanted to hire me to work with one of their newer hires, and I said, well, what is it you want me to work on? I said, the technical stuff's probably not. He said, no, they're amazing at that. They just don't seem to comprehend the business side. They said, I want them to be more entrepreneurial. And that was the exact comment. I said, oh, you want him to actually think like his territory is his and own it and realize that when your feet hit the ground every morning, you should be selling stuff. So anyway, you know how to sell stuff, but you kind of changed. You've got a different thing going on your own. And I'm excited about it, because you've asked me some questions about developing it. So you came up with this moniker, Crop Scout Christie. Now, am I paying you just to scout my crops? I'm paying you for more than that, right?
Absolutely. So I got my start scouting fields. Right. And I feel like it's a homage to my beginnings. Mm-hmm. Crop Scout Christie and that identity started out literally trying to understand how this alfalfa crop is translating into a food source for these other animals and understanding how that fit, and getting excited about wheat and emergence and diving into the science components of that. But it required me to physically be in the fields to be able to develop that properly. And so that's how I chose to do it. I would learn. I would go to the field to apply. And that was just how I built my identity. So I do still scout fields today. In fact, my clients that work with me today know very well I am in their fields. I don't feel like I can give them all of me if I am not physically engaging in their fields.
And not just fields, also orchards and vineyards and hemp plantations. Okay, let's talk about some of the stuff you're seeing now with your side biz, which is growing, right? You're growing it. Okay, so you advise, you help these people make money. They pay you per acre, per tree, per whatever it is. And then give me a couple of your clients. Give me some specialty crop.
Hops, for example.
Perfect. Hops, by the way, dear listeners and viewers, I forgot. It's at that time. Before we get into hops, which when we're done with this recording, we're going to enjoy some hop-infused products that come out of a tap handle. But before I can do that, I got to thank my sponsor, which is Harvest Profit. Harvest Profit is a software solutions company that was begun by Nick Horeb out of Fargo, North Dakota. But it doesn't matter where Nick is, nor does it matter where Harvest Profit is, because we live in a digital world. If you want a software solution to help your agricultural enterprise run the enterprise better, more efficiently, more profitably, go to harvestprofit.com and sign up for a 14-day free trial. You're going to like it. Okay, hops. Here's what I know. I did a gig. I spoke at the Washington Farm Bureau back in Yakima several years ago, and I learned that Yakima at that point was the source. The Yakima Valley was where like 95+% of the United States hops crop comes from. Now, that's been about, say, 6 or 8 years ago. Since then, the proliferation of craft beer continues to go crazy, and a lot of them are these double-hopped, triple-hopped IPAs with, what do they call them? They have a BU factor or something like this. So we're growing hops like we've never grown them before, and Michigan's always grown a few hops, but now maybe more than they used to.
Yeah, so Michigan has the microclimates you referenced earlier allows Michigan to grow a lot of diversity of crops. Hops being very sensitive to certain weather conditions, certain moisture conditions. In Yakima Valley, it's a completely different climatology. It's a very dry climate, more arid. It's protected from a lot of the things that we deal with here in Michigan. So growing hops outside of the Yakima Valley is an extreme challenge. But there are several farmers that were up for the challenge and seeing an opportunity in the market space to bring something interesting and unique. Hops are being grown literally all along the 45th parallel, all along in the world. And similarly, below the equator as well, I have a counterpart in Brazil that I have been engaging with now for several months, helping and coaching her as she coaches her clients on how to recommend nutrient management plans for hops.
So they tend to be at a certain latitude. Like if I wanted to grow hops in Georgia, I'm not going to be able to grow hops in Georgia, or not very successfully.
I won't say that there isn't hops. There's hops in Florida. There's hops in Georgia. But scaling it is very, very difficult. So what you get out of the hops that are grown in these non-perfect climates, there's hops grown in New Mexico, for goodness sake. There's no reason why you can't grow hops anywhere, but it comes back down to scaling and efficiency of production. And so Michigan has these little microclimates that do really, really well. So we have a little cluster of hops in the southwest corner of Michigan, one in the northwest corner of Michigan, and then we have Michigan Hops Growers Association has farmers registered all over the state, but on relatively small scales. So what we're really looking for that production system is the right climate.
Those products go to a microbrewery that's within 50 miles of there, probably.
Right. So there's actually a very large hops producer here in Indiana, Crazy Horse Hops. They're in Knightstown. I have a great relationship with those guys. They do a phenomenal job, and they're always looking to innovate. So they've been around for a couple of years now. They have a beautiful oasting house. They have the full-scale production there, and they're doing everything from wet hops, where you can actually harvest the hops wet right out of the field and go take that to a brewery for a wet hopped brewing technique, all the way to bagged and pelletized and baled material that gets shipped all around the world. Something super cool and new in the hops realm is extract. So they're taking the lupulin and extracting that from the biomass.
Wait a minute, lupulin.
Yes.
What's lupulin?
Lupulin is the compound in hops that gives it the
bitter flavor. By the way, it dawns on me. My wife points out, she says, you've done a good job of slowing down your cadence because you are a fast talker. And it dawned on me that if we've got someone that's a slow listener, they are really struggling because I'm talking slow for me, but you have a hard time talking slow, don't you?
Yeah.
I do too sometimes. People say, you got to slow down. I'm like, I can't think that slow. So I have to speak as fast as I think. Yeah. Anyway, all right, so hops. Most of it's going to be used close by, and the proliferation of microbrews and craft brewery places and all that, micro pubs, that's all where those things go. Are these people in Michigan, are they making money on hops?
The hops market is really, really tough right now.
Okay.
The hops market is at a very strange saturation point. Consumer demand drives certain things. What's hot right now in the hops that are planted in the ground this season may not be hot in 3 years when those hops are ready to be harvested. You
mean in terms of, it's the old thing about like vineyards, we're using this now type of a grape, and it turns out that 3 years from now, that grape has that flavor, that style of wine is not as popular. So, All right. So speaking of grapes, let's go with that. I've been to the wineries in Southwest Michigan. I've drank in my life probably in the neighborhood of half of an ounce of wine. I didn't like it, so I don't drink wine. But I went with my lovely wife and friends, and I'm usually the guy that hauls them around while they get out and they drink wine in Southwest Michigan. It's a neat thing. Is it viable? Is it happening? It seems to me that it actually must be because they keep popping up.
Sidebar. Are you also like a certified winery Uber driver, or have you added that to the resume yet?
I have not put it in there yet.
Okay.
So, but I can make sure that these amateur sommeliers get to their wine tour. So, do you work with any wineries?
I do. So I work mainly on the grape production side of things. Yep. And so a vineyard and a winery are two different things. Right. So a winery is where the wine is made. They often have tasting rooms and give you this agritourism appeal. A lot of grape producers don't have wineries, but they sell their fruit to a winery. Yep. So a winery may require, 100 ton of grapes to produce all the wine that they have projected for that season, but they're growing 150 ton. Where does the extra go? It goes to different places. Wineries that don't have the ability yet to, or they don't have established enough, or their cultural practices are lagging, so they're not getting the production they need. Those are the people that I like to work with to help them achieve their fruit production.
What do I need? What do I not know that I need to know about grape production? Certainly, you think of Napa Valley and all that, but in the upper Midwest, in the Great Lakes states, what's going on with the grapes up there? They're growing a lot of them?
Yeah, so I'll just use the Great Lakes for example. There's pockets even in Wisconsin and all around the Great Lakes, the Catawba and Ohio area. There's lots of places around the Great Lakes that have these little wine growing regions. What you probably don't know is that there are French varietals, which are what you would consider, or you might be familiar with, your Cabernet Sauvignon, your, any of your typical grapes that you would expect. Those are originating in the regions of France. There's also the cultivars originate in Italy and in Germany, Austria area too. So the cultivars that are being grown for commercial production came mainly from that region. Different areas have different cultivar nuances, but there is also American cultivars as well. We call them cold hardy grapes. I work with several cold hardy grape producers in Michigan very specifically. This is a relatively new market. These are relatively young vineyards, and these are grapes that tolerate the cold weather very, very well. So the areas like the Finger Lakes in New York, the higher latitudinal geographies, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, very well geared for that kind of production, and that's a really up and coming realm, invading the space on the shelves in your local wine store.
So the ones that you work with ultimately are almost all for wine. None of them go to Welch's or Smuckers.
Yeah, so there's a huge cluster of juice grapes that are produced in Southwest Michigan. A majority of the non-wine grapes in Michigan go right straight to Welch's. There's a couple of places. There's one in Paw Paw. There's a couple of places in Michigan that process right away. Nestle, the Gerber food company, baby food company, buys grapes as well. But yeah, that market in and of itself is continually dwindling.
Okay,
it's not cool to feed your kids juice anymore,
right? Because it's sugary and whatnot. Okay, if you said, "Hey, what's a consistent and persistent problem with soybeans?" I'd say, "Oh, okay, they've got some rust. We've got sudden death syndrome, and we've got herbicide-resistant weeds." I know these things because there's soybean fields across the road from me. What the hell problems am I talking about with grapes? What is it? Blight, fungus? What problems do you battle there?
So I would say grapes, for the most part, are highly susceptible to things like mildews. Are tough.
Okay.
Those are really yield limiters.
And so that's what you're dealing with there. Okay, one more specialty crop that you want to tell people about and what you've done with it, and then we're going to get into hemp. Cranberries, I don't know, blueberries, probably something you work with. The average person that's listening to this is like, I always wondered about that. What do you got?
Strange crops, I guess. I didn't know if you know this, but there's a ridiculous amount of pumpkins produced in Michigan. Although Indiana leads, I believe, in pumpkin production.
Yeah, maybe Illinois. Illinois, for some reason, is in the list I read once.
It's definitely up there. So pumpkins obviously are a popular crop, especially this time of year. Everybody's feeling the fall feels.
Right.
But so pumpkins have some different nuance. They require they have a very large fertility hunger. They require a lot of nutrients to grow, and they are susceptible to lots of different diseases. And so one of my really interesting success stories has been targeting managing calcium in the fruit all through the course of the growing season and taking a more biological approach to the disease management. So we're using natural solutions to fight disease and pests, and we're using a more aggressive calcium program to grow the fruit more robustly. Nitrogen isn't our limiter. It's how much calcium and magnesium and sulfur we have in the mix. So we just
it needs nitrogen, but it can't utilize it without the others. Is that the deal on the micros?
Right. So nitrogen is going to grow as vegetation. The fruit generally doesn't require a ton of nitrogen for the fruit finish.
Right.
The fruit finish nutrients look a lot more like, do we have blossom end rot? Is the bottom of my pumpkin getting nasty, or bottom of my squash? So we're kind of really working on that nutritional condition. Is a way to improve efficiency in production systems to limit how much nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus we need. We're focusing on these other things and using a lot less of the M, P, and K.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Hemp. I've had one person on this podcast to talk about hemp, and I do believe that there's some opportunity there. It's completely, what do they use the word, nascent. It is in its rookie season. It's a screwed up mess. The markets aren't clean. You got stoners that are buying marijuana and then opening dispensaries, and then there's people that say, well, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. You got industrial hemp. You got CBD. The whole thing is kind of screwy right now. And I have had farm guys say, I planted that stuff and then I couldn't get rid of it because they didn't have a contract or somebody backed out. What the hell's happening?
You basically just summarized it. All of those things are happening. Yep. All of those things are happening. And I believe that there's a couple of really, really stop gaps in the mix that are really causing it. I think nobody wants to touch the regulation with a 10-foot pole, and so the only voice that's coming to the forefront in terms of regulation is the DEA, and they don't have the jurisdiction per the 2018 Farm Bill that legalized industrial hemp.
Yep.
So, and in fact, 2014 Farm Bill is what legalized industrial hemp, and it was left up to the states of whether or not they wanted to adopt.
Okay, you said it was 2014.
14. Yep.
And then 18 is when it really became something we could do. So here's the question. All right, Christie, do you see weed and hemp, or are you only dealing with hemp? What is your job? What have you seen?
I work with cannabis producers that are growing recreationally.
I called it weed. You know what?
It's cannabis.
Okay.
It's cannabis. Get with the times.
All
it's
right.
cannabis.
Pot.
So
hooch. No, it's not hooch. Hey, whatever. All right.
I like to say this isn't the Cheech and Chong era, and I really, really hate the
jokes.
The misnomer. Yeah, because what I've seen in the cannabis industry, building a reputation and entering into, I don't even want to call it pharmaceutical. I think it's just a completely different approach to wellness that we're seeing in other ways. So this isn't just, it's a totally different realm. So yes, I work with cannabis producers on the medical and the recreational side. I also work with producers that are growing industrial hemp.
Before we do the hemp, because you're working with both of them. Let's talk about cannabis. First off, I believe there's going to be growth. I believe it's a growth category. I've seen the money pouring into it, pouring into it. When Philip Morris is taking stakes in this in Canada last year, when big money is pouring into something, there's some legitimacy there. Of course, big money also pours into the .com bubble, and big money is poured into Tesla. So they've been wrong, but I see an industry that there's a lot of demand. And, a friend of mine that used to work in the pharmaceuticals, I said, does this crap work? And he said, well, you know what? Even when I worked for Eli Lilly, we had all sorts of studies that said half of effectiveness was just based on patients' belief that it was going to improve their health or their feeling or their pain or whatever. So in that regard, maybe it's more effective than we think. I don't know. You think it's a legitimate industry that's going to be here for a long time and grow and grow and grow. And I do too.
I do. I agree with that. One of the biggest challenges there, that's a philosophical question, and I think that's a very difficult question to answer, is do you believe that cannabis has a medicinal use? I personally believe the answer is yes, because I've seen some things happen with people that I personally have relationships with that has been life-changing for them. Now, that's not to say that recreational use shouldn't be allowed. That's really no longer the narrative. It doesn't even matter. We're no longer being asked those questions.
Right.
And we're fighting the tide of modern pharmaceutical. That's a tsunami. I do not believe that people that are growing cannabis even recognize how big the tsunami of big pharma is against this. They view it as a threat, and they've got gazillions of dollars, and so that's going to happen. But it's good for agriculture, right? You've got somebody that's making money growing cannabis, and that's, if you can figure out a way to make money in agriculture as a producer, that's good. Yes. Yep, I totally agree. I mean, cannabis, whether you're for whatever your purpose is, there's opportunities out there, and the best thing, my very first question that I always get is, how do I know if this is the right crop for me? And actually, I've been working on developing some curriculum, more or less an online webinar type of thing to help you answer those questions, because everybody is wanting to know, should I go this route? How do I do this? Who do I connect with? Where do I start? And
so if someone does have those questions, because the problem seems to be getting rid of the stuff. If I grow a bushel of corn, my God, there's 3 ethanol plants and 4 grain mills within a 30-minute drive at my farm. I can go get rid of it. What do I do if I have a whole bunch of cannabis?
You don't grow it. That's really, if anybody has listened to any marketing information I've been putting out for the last 6-8 months, I'm not sitting here saying you shouldn't grow it, but I'm sitting here saying you shouldn't grow it. If you're going to plant corn without a contract, then you need to be willing to accept what market is paying when you harvest the crop, right? You have to be willing to accept those risks. You are not going to plant more corn than what you are going to risk. There's no difference. This is absolutely not different. If you do not have a plan, then you better be willing to. So
you say it's the same thing with cannabis. Okay, then tell me about hemp. Different because it is more accepted, and certainly I think there's fabric is one of the big ones. We got a whole bunch of people wearing polyester, as the environmental movement keeps, growing, and there's this social consciousness, the younger kids especially, they want to invest in things that make them feel good, socially conscious. I can't think of anything more important than saying, hey, that polyester shirt will never go away. This is made from natural hemp. Is that the way? Where does hemp get used? Fiber, clothing?
Yes.
What else?
So hemp has just absolutely limitless opportunities. Absolutely everything you see that is plastic that we create with a polymer can be produced with a hemp-derived polymer. Mm-hmm. And part of that conversation that you're just referencing, this movement to want to be more green, there's some really interesting things to kind of, unpack with that statement when it comes to industrial hemp. So the hemp that's been produced by and large here in the States so far has been for cannabinoids. They are growing this for the floral material that accumulates the cannabinoids so they can extract that CBD or CBG or CBD, and there's all kinds of lower cannabinoids there to be utilized in a consumable material. The droplets, you could roll it and smoke it like you would, just like a standard cannabis joint. You can imbibe industrial hemp in this way. But there are so many other opportunities to impact the economy, impact our independence as a manufacturer, and leveraging the genius that exists within the American, manufacturing machine. And literally everything you see that is plastic can be produced with a hemp-derived polymer. And that technology is on the cusp of exploding right now. That is a very different cultivar. If I'm growing hemp for fiber, I should not be trying to harvest flower material and prevent male plants to be in the field. I want to have both male and female plants in the field. I want the pollination. I want it to complete its maturity. When we're growing hemp for CBD, we're harvesting a crop that is largely immature so that it stays compliant for THC. We need to stay compliant for THC, which means we are harvesting that plant way before it's reached its genetic potential for maximizing the quality. So that's a different plant. That grows like a little Christmas tree, like your standard, cannabis plant. Your grain and your fiber grows very tall. We seed it solid like a wheat crop. It's a completely different production system with completely different needs.
It's interesting. Which you think all of it has big opportunity?
I think it all has big opportunity. I think that we are currently in a vastly oversupplied situation with CBD-based products. Yeah. There's been enough floral material harvested in the last 3 years to supply the U.S. demand for something like 20 years. Yeah,
so really it's got to be on the fiber side. If there's to be something, it's going to be on the fiber, hemp fiber side.
Yes, and the soil quality properties there are too. It has a very fibrous root. It has a lot of root exploration. The ability to regenerate the soil is really this is a carbon negative crop. We can utilize that. Those fiber plants or grain plants, the waste can be utilized for construction materials as well.
Hemp could be take care of the plastic problem. It could take care of. I can finally get a plastic straw without the environmental wackos getting after me. Mm-hmm. I've read that it's very good. It's drought tolerant, right?
Very much so.
So it's drought tolerant, and then also it doesn't deplete soil. It seems to be actually, like you said, pretty good for soil.
Yes, it has a tremendous ability to sequester carbon, and while it's going through that carbon sequestration process, it's actually converting it into something completely different. So it regenerates. We can grow this on an annual or twice a year basis, where our forests and our other crops that are cycling that carbon for us take 30 and 40 years to regenerate. So there's an opportunity to complement the forestry realm and not be antagonistic. There's an opportunity to complement American grown cotton and not be antagonistic. You can produce clothing articles with hemp and cotton together, right? So this doesn't mean that we abandon cotton. It doesn't mean that we abandon American forestry. This means that we are providing something supplemental that can heal our land, that can provide American jobs, and I'm really excited about that. We have a tremendous amount of feed quality opportunities, too, in the grain.
How many hemp producers are you working with?
I personally consult for 32 hemp producers in the Midwest.
That is fantastic. We can talk about hemp a lot, and maybe we'll have Christie back and do that, but I know that you have work to do, and so do I, and so does she. So here's the deal. We're going to put a wrap on this. Closing thoughts.
I just thank you for the opportunity to come on here. And if you guys want to follow along in my journey, I'm always up to something. You can follow me on Crop Scout Christie Lee on Instagram, Crop Scout Christie on Facebook. I'm on Snapchat, LinkedIn. Look me up and follow along, and let's have some fun.
She produces good videos that are educational with a dose of entertainment, almost like she learned that from somebody. And she is always doing different stuff. Again, it's not just that she's not looking at wheat germplasm every day. She's doing something cool and doing something different. That's why I thought she'd be a fun addition to the show. Plus, I like her. So anyway, Crop Scout Christie, check her out wherever you do your social media thing, and you can find her through me because she's always got some interesting stuff talking about specialty crops and also the future of hemp. So we'll bring her back on in a year, and we'll talk about where hemp is going or where it's been. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Damian.
Till next time, it's the Business of Agriculture podcast brought to you by my good friends at Harvest Profit. Do go and check out harvestprofit.com. You know you have a business enterprise that could benefit from a software solution that will help your business look like the business that it is. Harvestprofit.com. Follow me on all my social medias. Please share this podcast with someone that you think could enjoy it. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel where all these podcasts have been going since January. It's the Damian Mason channel on YouTube. Till next time, thank you, dear. It's the Business of Agriculture.